Hello, and welcome to the Liquidity event. I've got my sweatshirt on today. Check it out.
Classy.
Love
it.
I'm your host, AJ.
And I am your substitute co-host for Mr. Shane Mason, John Owens.
Your sometimes
Filling in.
host.
Welcome to episode 35 of the Liquidity event. Recording here on March 23rd, airing on Friday, March 25th. It's the end of March already. Holy shit.
Indeed. Mr. Shane is not with us today because it is tax season. And as the director of our tax department, every hour of his this time of year is quite precious. So it's not to say you and my time is not also quite precious, but
we are not as precious as Mr. Mason, and I think it's a hair thing, to be honest.
That's true.
But
That's true. Well, John, it's always great to have you here. What are you reading? Reading anything good this week?
So, well, I started this book. It's called What Happened to You. It's by Dr. Bruce Perry and Oprah Winfrey.
Okay.
It's about, talking to people about like traumatic events or things that happened in their lives, but you don't say like, what's wrong with you? You say, what happened to you, as inviting the question. But it's a little heavy, so I've been nursing it a little bit at a time. Yes, it's interesting, kind of like a spin on self-help, but yeah, not one that you can necessarily pick up and storm through. At least I can't. So, what about you?
Well, I've been complaining for the past couple of weeks that I've just been too busy and stressed out to even pick up a book. And I'm pleased to say that I have finally picked up a book, and I'm very excited. It's called The Grace of Kings by Ken Liu, and it's book 1 of the Dandelion Dynasty. It's like classic world-building fantasy, my cup of tea. I'm about 50 pages in. I've been reading it to wind down at night, and I love it so far. Nice. So that's a hard recommend from me. We have another fantasy. What?
I was gonna say I've been watching reruns of Everybody Loves Raymond to calm down at night, but I appreciate the fact that you read instead.
And you're just drinking water because you have a client meeting after this.
I have a client meeting right after this. Yeah.
I do not. Actually, I do have a client meeting after this, but it's a friendly dinner, so I'm drinking. It's a social event. I'm drinking what's called a pineapple drift, which I invented, which is whiskey and a pineapple spindrift and an ice cube, because as we all know, during tax season, there's not time to make cocktails. So it's quite delicious.
Didn't you crank out a bunch of tax extensions earlier? So shouldn't you be allowed to have like how many fingers of gin in your drink because of that?
I do have a few fingers of whiskey in my drink.
There we are.
I did file a few extensions. No IPOs that are worth talking about this week. It's dry out there, folks. It's a sad story. Hoping for a rainy day of lots of IPOs.
Yes.
We're in this moment right now where a lot of tech stocks are off their 2021 highs, and a lot of our clients are coming to us and saying, I don't want to sell. Like, last year I sold my stock at $160. This year now it's trading at $70. I don't want to sell. And John, you wrote this great post for our blog last week. I was wondering if you could kind of let us know your thoughts on that. Like, why does selling equity at a lower price than you're used to or you're anchored to make sense? What's going on?
Yeah. And I mean, it's like the old, what did grandpa teach you about stocks? Like buy low, sell high. Like that's how it works. That's great in theory, and I'm all for it. And I think you should sell your equity when it's high. Don't get me wrong, but you should also consider selling your equity when it's low. And this isn't just me saying this because I need clients to stick to their trading plans and want them to achieve their goals. So that's very important. But it's also saying it when you look at some of the numbers behind it, and we get to kind of some of the core concepts of finance. And so there's two main themes that we need to think about here. One is opportunity cost, or as I like to think about it, FOMO. Is the best way to think about opportunity cost. What am I missing out on if I do not sell this? If I sell this equity, what can I do with it? What are all the different options? And so opportunity cost, I like to equate to investment FOMO. I can invest this money anywhere I want. It doesn't need to just be in my company's stock. And so are there other investments that could potentially make me more money? That's one part of the calculation, or that have better prospects going forward. Because, if you look at it.
One thing that we just can't forget with opportunity cost is also, or can we invest that money in something that's not going to make us crazy? We have this all concentrated in one position. Like, let's remove some of that nonsense and that emotional roller coaster from our lives. That's
And
what you're
that's
about
where
to
we get
say?
to the next
Yeah. Okay.
piece, which
Sorry.
is risk-adjusted returns.
Yeah.
No, AJ's bearing the lead here, but no, that's okay. Risk-adjusted returns, which are really saying, if I can own Spotify stock or I can own the Vanguard Total Stock Market Index, and they get the same return, let's say over a period of time, I would much rather own the stock market index over Spotify because, in one respect, it's it's more diversified, it's less volatile, and like if Spotify goes bankrupt, which I don't necessarily think that's going to happen or anything like that, but and you only own Spotify stock, then that's worth zero. If you own the Vanguard Total Stock Market Index, just one stock in your Vanguard Total Stock Market Index has gone bankrupt, and so you're still fine. And so we come back to core concepts of finance, but I think so many times we just anchor to, but it was worth so much more a little while ago. And we don't anchor to the fact that there are other investment opportunities and there's different levels of risk with different investments. And that's kind of what I go into in the blog. It's a little bit nerdy. It's a little kind of, into some of the investment weeds.
I'm surprised by that.
Yes, coming from me, of all people. As I wrote it on a train, on an Amtrak train, like nerding out on tax stuff. So yeah, it's my favorite place to write.
So, obviously single companies have the possibility of the stock literally going to zero, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like a company can go bankrupt, it can get absorbed. We have these things called penny stocks, that we have seen that in throughout history over and over again. What happens if the Vanguard Total Stock Market Index Fund goes to zero?
We've been through nuclear war.
Okay.
It's over. Yes, we've got bigger problems.
Indeed.
Cheerful note here. Given the state of the world at the moment, but yes, that's the most likely scenario to drive that to zero.
While we're on the subject of, equity that was worth something last year and is worth significantly less this year, something that has come up with on quite a few tax returns. It's tax season, folks, for those who are listening who aren't aware. Abundantly
if you just woke up from hibernation.
Aware by our dour moods and rude emails. I apologize. We get very little sleep during this time. Thank you to the government for
in
making
normal times as well, but especially this time of year for AJ and I.
Yeah,
the insomniacs on the team.
Just to remind everybody that the way that tax preparation works is that we have to do all of the work that we could do all year in a 6-week period of time. So we are all quite stressed out. Anyways, this is coming up and over and over again. Where last year someone made a decision to exercise an incentive stock option or exercise. Mostly incentive stock options, with the idea that they would hold it, they would try to hold it for a year, and then they would pay a lower tax rate. They get the long-term capital gains rate significantly lower than the ordinary income rate. So that was the strategy. But because they're incentive stock options, they had to pay something extra called the alternative minimum tax. Now it's a year later. It's time to sell. We've held for 365 days, and we're selling at a lower price than the price of that stock on the day we exercised. And that sucks. That sucks for the client. It sucks for the tax return, because typically with our AMT we'd pay that AMT, but we'd be able to get it back faster. But now we're waiting a lot longer because that stock unfortunately fell in value. So that's a downside to having incentive stock options and waiting to exercise them once a company is public. That's something we're noticing, and it's nasty.
And really, it again comes back to this conversation about like risk. Which risk do you want to take? Like you can exercise oftentimes those options right when you are granted them or a year after you're granted them when that spread is really tight. But your company might be in Series A and you might be 23 years old and have student loans and be like, yes, it's $10,000 exercise, but like I have $8,000 in my checking account, because I'm just out of school. And like if you're lucky, and so you have to wait, and then what happens? That the risk with waiting is that it is worth something, and then you have a big tax bill. Like that's a great situation to have, but it's all we do. I feel like is just manage these different sorts of risks from a tax perspective, from an equity perspective, and help folks understand like what are the trade-offs.
Yeah, and there's also the possibility that we just disqualify it. The idea of incentive stock options are so amazing. They have this amazing tax benefit. Once your company's public and we've got a volatile stock. Not always, right? And we have a hard time convincing clients sometimes to disqualify, to say like, let's just exercise, pay the regular tax and move on with our lives. Sometimes we're playing these like long-term games with AMT. I'm exhausted by it. Clients are exhausted by it, but we continue to play the game. remember, I always think about, and we hear this story all the time, well, of course I would have exercised my incentive stock options when I got them granted when I was 23, but I didn't have cash. I didn't have the money.
And I didn't know. I didn't even know what they were.
I was taking, every time I went to the ATM, I would take out $10 instead of $20 because that's all I thought I had in my checking account. I didn't have money to exercise my ISA.
Yeah.
I was like, are you kidding me? Anyway,
when I was 23, I used to grocery shop at Aldi, and I'd spend like $25 a week on groceries somehow.
Yep.
Which was like kind of crazy, and like feed myself for a week, which was like basically, as we called it in my childhood, noodle steak for dinner, which is just noodles, by the way, pasta. And so I like to call them noodles, but yeah. I
love that. I'm going to use that.
That's what 23 was. And then like occasionally let's mix in some tricolored rotini to keep it real. But yeah, I mean, I think when you think about that, you think about these startups, these employers are, interestingly enough, getting evaluated, especially as lots of people are taking startup jobs at employers during COVID. While there's a little bit of a weak transition there to our next article about
I was like, is this a segue or a point? Is a segue?
This is a segue.
It was a weak ass.
I was struggling to land the plane. I'm sorry. It's been a long week.
Well, some other people have been struggling to land planes. Anyway. Oh, too soon.
Jesus.
Anyways. Yeah, you've got this article in here, America's Best Startup Employees of 2022, which is not fair because we're only 3 months into 2022. So those employers could turn around real fast.
I'm not really sure how I feel about 2022, or actually like the 2020s in general so far. I know we're only about a quarter of the way through, but the jury is still out.
So, John, what makes a great employer? I want to know.
Oh, boy. Shit, this is being recorded. No, it's interesting. In the article, they say it's being a more inclusive work environment, having flexibility, hybrid, all that. And I think those are all really important factors when you think about what makes a good employer. But, I think for me, when I think about like work and having a good employer, and like, you and I are wired like this. I know not everybody's wired like this. Is like having really cool, fun problems to solve and like new challenges. And like, that's like, for me, what makes a great work environment, that like I'm not fixing the same thing constantly. I'm interacting with new people. I'm figuring out new things. I'm helping build something. That's really cool. And I think that's the wonderful thing about a startup. And one of the things in the article was that you start out at a startup and you're one of the early employees. It's like you get to be this jack of all trades and work on different projects, and then you get to participate in that growth, and then you eventually get to like think about your career as a funnel and like hone in on the thing you really want to focus on. Which is like so much different than like the big corporate environment. My first employer out of college had 60,000 employees at the time, probably is about 120,000 now. It's like you do this one thing and then you send it off to like 40 different people who touch on like one line in it. And so you'll get 39 emails, because I typically mess up that report. And you get all these emails telling you like from all different people, like this line's wrong, you got my hospital reported incorrectly. And it's like, oh crap. Whereas
Yikes.
like,
yeah, I mean,
anyway.
These lists are, like what the methodology, it's a Forbes list. The methodology is that they hired this research company. They evaluated 2,500 US businesses, with at least 50 employees, in 3 criterias, employer reputation, employee satisfaction, and growth. And they considered any company founded between 2012 and 2019 that has at least 50 employees to be a startup. And then they're naming the best, 500 of these companies. And there's like a nice long article about like all the different characteristics that, ranked some of these companies a little bit higher. And some of the highlights were that remote work is key, equitable work, and having an environment where, what did we see here? It's about creating a culture of transparency and openness and teamwork, one of the people interviewed said.
I like it.
Yeah. Transparency is one of our core values.
Transparency is one of our core values.
Here
don't
at
ask me to name
FI.
all 8 on this. Please don't test
I
me.
wrote them and I don't even know all 8 of them. But yeah, I mean, I'm sort of seriously, like, you said having, a challenge, having creative projects to work on. I agree with that. I think it's also just, and this is also on the employee, which is like having that perfect balance of independence.
Typical founder comment, typical boss comment here.
Yeah,
what do we got, AJ?
Yeah, it's true. It's that great balance of independence and great management, which is, you are given the agency and the independence to do your job. You are trusted to be the right hire for the right job. You're given, you got a job description, you do your job. And then when you get stuck, you have great management that can be there to support you and is kind of always looking out to ask you, do you have everything you need to do your job, rather than here's the 17 boxes you need to check to do your job today.
Exactly. Not a bureaucracy. And like, I think one of the things that makes me proud of our team very often is that, we give them somewhat of a box to work within, in terms of how we recommend things, how we work with clients. But also, I love it when they come to us like, hey, like, this is what I did for this client and how I solved this unique problem that they have. I'm like, great, let's save that because you're going to help your colleague who's going to encounter this later on and down the line. But no, and we're fully remote, which also helps in terms of the, getting ourselves on this list here soon, right?
That's the plan. Yeah, we're crunching, slouching towards 50. Yeah, remote work is key. I mean, every person that I meet in social circles now that COVID is hopefully relaxing a little bit, I'm going out a little bit more, is like, I'm not going back to work. I'm quitting my job. They're sending us back. We're supposed to be there 3 days a week. I don't want to do it. I can find a better job. So
yeah, I'm never going back to an office. This is great. It's great. So. Yeah, mortgage rates. Wow, that was not a good segue.
Yeah.
Jeez, I got to work on my skills. But there were headlines because mortgage rates are above 4% and people are freaking out. AJ, you are closer to the housing market than I am. What do you think about this?
I think they should rate. I mean, we can't have this like historical low borrowing rate forever. It's madness. We have these, people who have made a living out of flipping these houses because they can get these like ridiculously low mortgage rates. And I think it's bad for communities. I'm happy that our clients can borrow $3 million at 2.5%, which is what happened last.
2.85, yeah.
Which what happened last year? Like, yay, I'm happy for you, but like that is not good for the economy. Like that is not how this is supposed to work. Like you have that money, you shouldn't need to borrow it. I don't know. I'm sick of talking about this. Honestly, mortgage rates are going up. Deal with it. There's a housing crisis. There's no end in sight, according to the New York Times.
Well, I mean, with rates going up, that might be the thing that slows this down a little bit. I mean, the real estate market's been absolutely berserk. It got torpedoed in the beginning of 2020 because COVID happened and everything shut down. People took their houses off the market and people couldn't sell. And then all of a sudden it flipped because so many people who are renting were like, I need a place to interior design now because it's COVID and I'm cooped up. And so therefore, I'm either going to break up with my partner or I'm going to spend all our time together painting the walls and doing DIY projects and watching this old house on PBS. But, I think it's important to like look at this with some perspective, which is, when we were younger in our childhoods, mortgage rates of like the aughts were in the mid to upper single digits. And in the 90s were even higher than that. And in the 80s, when my parents bought their first house in 1982, the rates were in the teens. They were getting federally subsidized mortgages at like 15% because inflation was running rampant back then. And so like, I'm not like overly convinced that 4% or even 4.5% mortgage rates are like this end all be all. The sky is crashing down. It's just that we've been lulled into this sense of rates should be from 3 to 4% for the last 12 years basically.
Yeah, we all have short-term memories, which is I remember my friend told me they got 2.1%. I'm going to my mortgage broker saying, I need 2.1%. They're going, I can only get you 4. I'm sorry. That's the way things are. So speaking of your parents, you mentioned that anecdote of, them getting a mortgage in the 80s. Maybe their mortgage was 12%. Now, remember the flip side of that is that their savings at the bank, they were probably getting 8 to 10% on their cash.
Yeah, you were getting a bunch. Yeah, you were getting so much on your CDs and stuff, as opposed to now. I mean, we're also been lulled in the sense of like you just don't get paid anything for your cash unless you're buying I bonds, of course.
Shut up with your I bonds. But look, so there's this other article we have in here, which is like shocking. It's a great read. It's a Bloomberg article, and it's statistically based. The article title is "Wells Fargo Rejected Half Its Black Applicants in Mortgage Refinancing." Boom. So this article basically points to Wells Fargo and says, look, there is blatant discrimination amongst mortgage lenders who are, looking at a white borrower and a black borrower, and the statistics show that more often than not, all things being equal, the white borrower gets approved or the black borrower does not. Obviously, the mortgage companies will come out and say, well, no, it's based on, it's all algorithms and credit scores and yada, yada, yada. But one of the things in this article that I found very interesting, which is your parent situation, is that, they were, a lot of these second generation homeowners are looking to their parents, and their parents actually have these mortgages from the 80s. And they're like, Mom, why don't you refinance? And mom just, never was approached by the banker. They're just like completely shut out of the system. Mom is paying 13-14% on her mortgage. She could easily refinance tomorrow for, right now, 4 or 5%.
Well, I think the other thing is that, like, do you trust the bank? You know what I mean? I think, like, generations and subsets of the population have been screwed over so much that they don't trust the banks. So they don't care that the fact that the mortgages are 10%. They're not going to go sign another set of paperwork because they just don't. They don't trust them. And I think, one of the things that stood out to me in the article is that low-income white applicants had nearly the same approval rate as high-income black applicants. When you look at the data, and like, this is crazy. This is redlining. There was a lot of focus on like taking out redlining and some of the financial regulations of the 90s. But it's still happening. And I think the flaw that we need to keep in mind is that these algorithms are still built by people. Yeah. And people are inherently biased. And so if you put biased data and have biased people into building algorithms, it doesn't necessarily make the process better. It's just that, like, the guy at the bank in like communities and community banking back in the day, who would have been able to say to you as maybe a lesser attractive applicant, like, hey, but I know you and I know you work at the factory down the street and all this, and so I am going to help you out. He gets overruled by the algorithm, and so you aren't able to help out some people, but you are continuously screwing over historically oppressed folks in the first place, which is, obviously very fucked up.
Yeah, it's super fucked up. And there's just so many like tidbits in here. It's like, so first of all, there's this great book about like the housing discrimination throughout the 20th century and into the 21st century. It's called The Color of Law, A Forgotten History of How Our Government Segregated America by Richard Rothstein. I read it. It's like one of my favorite books. It's just like, it's, we know all these things. We didn't learn them in school because we learned them later in life when we learned that American history was not so rosy. It's a great book. Anyway, there's a little bit of positive lining in this article in that there are slow changes to the system. And one of them is that, having a past history of on-time rent payments is now considered for some credit scores. Not quite FICO, which is the main one that matters for most mortgages, but we're starting to see like, hey, you might not have a credit card, you might not have credit history, but you've made, on-time payments for the past 2 years to your landlord. Like, that should count for something. That should show the bank that you're a responsible borrower. Maybe you don't have the traditional, white family down the street whose, dad took out a credit card for the kid in high school and has, 10 years of credit history. Like, good for them. We have to look at different factors. We have to be able to empower people to be homeowners in this amazing, low interest rate environment that we're experiencing.
But
still,
while we're on the topic, still team rent.
Still don't buy a house.
Still don't buy a house necessarily, but there shouldn't be these roadblocks and there shouldn't be this, discrimination in that space. On a lighter note, romance scams were at a 5-year high, and 56,000 Americans were reported losing $547 million in love-bait ploys in 2021, up from 17,000 in 2017. And so the Tinder Swindler is out there and scamming people. This is crazy. 56,000 people, mostly through online dating, it seems.
This is one of those articles, which is why I hate the internet in 2022. It's like, I clicked on this article to be like, I'm ready to read all these stories. This article is like 300 words. It's just like, here's the facts.
It's Axios. That's how they work, AJ.
I know, but like, where's the 3,000 word piece deep dive from the New Yorker or Harper's? Like, hello, journalists.
You're looking for the Atlantic here, and you're reading Axios. It's tax season. I don't have time for 3,000 words, okay? Give me a tweet. But yeah, I mean... obviously we just need to go back to the old-fashioned way of dating, which is obviously speed dating. And that's how you meet folks and know that they're genuine because you gaze into their eyes.
Hey, nice to meet you. I'm going to need $50,000 to fix to fix the leak. I think this, you said lighter note. I think this is awful. I think this is sad. I don't know the stories behind these numbers, but I would imagine it's a lot of elderly, lonely people who, just want someone that they can trust, and they get swindled.
No, it is. I agree.
And for anyone who's ever been scammed, at some point, I would imagine all of us have been scammed in our lives. When you get scammed and you realize it, you feel shame and you don't want to tell anyone. And that's like, a lot of these I imagine go unreported because people are just so ashamed. Like, of course I saw all the warning signs. Of course I saw all these
Mhm.
things happen to me, but I just ignored them, and I feel so stupid, and
Yeah.
I'm embarrassed, and I'm not telling anyone. I'm not telling my son that I met a man online, and we went on a vacation. I paid him for the vacation we were supposed to go on, and then he
Yeah.
disappeared on me.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. It
that
was
sucks.
$15,000. Yeah. Yeah. And so I think the rule for online dating or any dating should be green flags only. Okay. No red flags here in 2022. You're looking for green flags.
I'm full of red flags. I'm a walking red flag.
AJ's locked down though.
Mm.
Sorry to disappoint
True.
our listeners or the
True,
guy who
true.
commented on the YouTube video once. Anyway, you know, we got another one in here. Mackenzie
Dude,
Scott.
you're fired. You are not welcome back until you clean up your segue act here. These are terrible.
Okay, go ahead. You do it.
segues.
You do it. You get me from swindling
Speaking-
exes.
Yeah, speaking of
Speaking of
terrible
swindling exes.
Yeah, speaking of swindling exes. Mackenzie Scott, former spouse of
Jeff Bezos.
the man who went to the moon in a penis.
The penis who went to the moon in a penis. Anyway,
Oh my god, I will never get it. The Musk Bezos dick swinging rocket launch has to be. How was that not the plot of what's the mini-me movie? Austin Powers. That's an Austin Powers plot.
oh yes, it does seem like one.
Anyways, Mackenzie Scott, in the divorce, was married to the founder of Amazon, who is worth, billions and billions. She is, by all estimates, worth about 55 billion right now. She, amongst tech billionaires, is a notable exception that she's very public and giving with her money. Slight asterisk there. I see a lot of outrage on the internet, like, why doesn't he give it away like Elon and Jeff, like, give your money away? It's like, we have to remember that most of their money is tied up in stock of their company. So if they do give it away, if they do sell it, they lose control. So there is that kind of like, I do want to be charitable, but I don't want to quite give up control of my company.
How much money and control do you freaking need? You
I
know what I
know,
mean?
I know,
Like that's
I know.
the thing. That's the thing. When is enough?
I'm being devil's advocate here.
Yes.
But yeah, she's a shining beacon of hope amongst this tech billionaire set. She's very giving. She actually lists out the charities that she gives to, which I think that's really interesting to me, because I find amongst our clients, it's like you have sudden wealth. Like, oh wow, most of our clients don't have $55 billion, but it's
none of our clients have $55 billion. Just to clarify,
to be clear,
that's news to anyone yet.
But it's what do I do with this money? I want to be charitably inclined, but like I actually don't know where to give. Like, what are the charities that are going to be matched with the things that I care about? It's like the ones that have great marketing materials. Planned Parenthood. What's the animal one? ASPCA. Yep. Like those are very obvious ones. Like, yeah, of course that's where I'm going to think. But like, there's also these other, lesser funded charities. And she listed, I think it was like 465 charities that she gave to. It was a blog post.
$3.8 billion total. And yeah,
I thought it was, no, it was 12 billion.
She's given away 12 billion so far since her and Jeff split up.
3.8
and she quickly remarried as well.
To a school teacher.
Yes. No,
always learning.
But yeah, I mean, like, yeah, I think, I looked at this, I'm like, why the hell isn't this normal? Why can't we have people who make tons of money give it away while they're alive and make an impact now? Like, oh, I'll donate all this money when I'm dead in 40 years. Well, maybe the world will be over for all we know. Not to be so cheerful about it.
Why didn't they just pay tax on it in the first place?
If you really want to give back, yes, sell it, pay the tax, and then donate. Yeah.
Sell your stock, give your money to the local government. Oops, your state doesn't have state income tax. Anyway.
You live in Washington. But, yeah. Any riffs you want to do here on tax season? We've already done this. We've already talked
I'm over
taxes.
tax season.
Get us your documents.
Clients, what is going on? Give us your damn documents. What is the problem?
Your documents.
You have them. It's in your email.
Your company probably got it wrong in the first place. That's what we're finding out as well.
Please.
But,
please give me your documents. We started texting you. If you get a text message from your planner, you are in big trouble. Like, we are pissed.
Yes.
We are actively angry at you and mad. Just so
that was
you know.
such a terse. Hey there, it's John from Brooklyn FI. Hope you're doing well. Just
Give me your fucking W-2.
Is that rage translator? Was that a Key and Peele thing? Like the rage interpreter? Like, this is what I actually mean?
Yes.
Any no-brainers or celebrity crushes, AJ?
No, we're out of time, man. Thanks for listening.
We're out of time.
It's been the Liquidity Event. You can always email us at liquidityevent@brooklynfi.com. You can leave us a voicemail. We'll play it on the air. podinbox.com/liquidity event. Show notes for this show. Great articles this week, I have to say. brooklynfi.com/episode 35. You've been great. John, you've been great. See you next week.
Thanks for having me. Brooklyn FI stands can leave a review if they want to be weird about it.